Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a active pattern that I'm starting to see in a long range. I don't know if, I know I do have a lot of people that look at the models themselves and kind of like to analyze them, and I want to hear in the comments down below if you guys are seeing the same trends I will talk about in this video, because obviously I learn a lot from you guys. You guys just like to see what I have to say, and yeah, I do think, going back to what I was saying, that there's going to be a very active pattern coming up into late January and early February. And this one is interesting. It could mean a lot of rain for some, a lot of snow for others. I think plenty of cold air, but also warm-ups, because as you have with volatile kind of weather patterns, warm-ups, cool-downs are what must go up, must go down. I think there's a potential for some very, very large winter storms, and yeah, we'll just have to see. But again, last time I did this, I made a video, and I called for an active pattern. I think it was around the early start of January, and we did see those, several systems. The one that kind of caused that highway mess across Virginia, the one that did that central all the way up the northeast coast winter storm that dropped 27 inches of snow in portions of Ohio into Iowa. There were several. It was an onslaught of storms, and it did calm down since then, and now it looks as if we are entering a more calmer pattern. But again, in the long range, in the next I think week and a half, past that time frame, it looks very active. But there is still some activity that is occurring right now, and I do want to talk about that. And let's start going into it right away. So notice we have a winter weather advisory. I showed you this at the beginning, right? This isn't anything significant. It is a moderate event, though. It isn't like a tiny event. As you saw on the radar, we do have the Clipper system. It is a Clipper. Sorry about that. It is occurring in very cold temperatures, or at least for the most part, which is why the snow doesn't have a problem with accumulations. Notice the Twin Cities have been seeing snow now for several hours. I don't know how much snow they have seen. I know they're expected to see around 1 to 2. Some amounts may be locally higher or lower, but notice that the bulk of this really snow is to the south, the heavy winter weather advisory warranted areas. 2 to 4 as you climb down towards the south and east into Iowa, Wisconsin. Right there you see more amounts into the 2 to 5. There are 3 to 5 right there. By the lakes, there are some winter storm watches where some lake enhancement may help out. You can see from the actual event 3 to 5, but additionally with that lake effect snow, there could be 5 to 9. This stretches through northern Indiana 2 to 5 into Ohio 2 to 5. So you can see it's pretty consistent, right? But again, there could be some localized amounts over 6 inches into portions of Wisconsin, southeastern Wisconsin, Iowa, or Illinois, and obviously near the lakes there are some lake effect watches, and you can see some of those have pretty good amounts of snow associated with them, warnings and some advisories where the lake effect snow won't be as persistent, but it's still there. So that is basically the main weather event. We do have a lot of cold air, which isn't really, you can't see on the radar, but you can see by looking at these advisories. Wind chills. I mean, dude, these these areas across the upper plains have been just absolutely cold for most of the January time frame. I know that they have seen a few snowstorms across, the Midwest and whatnot, but really mainly North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the UP have been just hammered with so much cold. I mean, it's the first time in a while, even for my location, that it has been a cold but dry January. Usually it's at least more snowy, but really a interesting year so far, and I'm sure that a lot of you have had interesting experiences, from a lot of snow in certain cities to just about nothing, for cities like Chicago or Detroit. But let me show you what I mean by this long range pattern. So in the short range, I do want to say that there will be some activity, but it's not really what I consider an active pattern. You can see little clippers, little storms kind of biting down through on the front nose of the jet stream. We do have some warm air towards the south, some thunderstorms, convective energy. Nothing too extraordinary. I do want to mention, again, that there isn't going to be a chance for real big snows. Notice a little event, right? So that may still bring a little bit of snow. I mean, this one that we have going on right now was forecasted to only bring around 2 inches for a majority of the areas. It has ever since increased, the snowfall amounts. So some of them could be a little bit of a surprise, but again, nothing too extraordinary. However, there's a catch to this. The first threat of a big system is around the 150-hour time frame and a bit further out. This is where we have a chance for a large nor'easter. Now, you can't really tell with the European. I mean, we do have a good combination of precipitation and cold air, but they don't really marry themselves or couple themselves together. And you can see it does form a nasty storm. It's just off the coast mainly, and it kind of goes away. But there are quite a few models, especially on the GFS side, that show a large nor'easter. We'll definitely have to monitor that. I don't want to make just one single video about it because it's too kind of unconfident about that. I am, at least, and we'll have to wait and see how things develop. But what we start seeing that's a monumental change in terms of the activity is where we see a lot of the cold air stay, but we see Pacific moisture reaching the United States and reaching it in quantities and latitudes, if you will, that are much more southern and much more higher than expected. Obviously, southern meaning the latitudes, and higher the precip. The amounts are going to be much more significant. Kind of reminiscing or reminding me of a pattern, in early December, just not to that extreme, where we saw just storm after storm move through California and the West. Notice again another potential right there. The European actually does show a nor'easter. By the time this is the 1st of February, you're right. February is considered nor'easter month. Whether or not this will happen, it's tough to tell. You can see plenty of cold air though for that to occur, and we do have another system starting to brew out here with that western moisture. You could see the snow returning back to the mountains. They start off with a very good year. I don't know how much snow they have left now. I'm assuming it's more down closer to what they normally expect. And yeah, it looks as if it won't be maybe as cold. It's still cold, but you could see that whenever you have Pacific moisture, warm-ups do occur, and that does allow for that snow to fall. So again, nothing yet in the short term. There will be a long time before any advisories or warnings get posted from this pattern that I'm talking about. But let me, before I show you the ensembles, I'll show you a few individual models that go out even further than the European. Notice, again, as I was saying, little clippers, little events, and very, very cold air. That's going to be definitely the headlines for the next week and a half. But then notice, again, there's that nor'easter threat. If you're called, the European didn't really show anything of it, and this is by the end of this current week. Notice the GFS develops this into a monster. Whether or not this happens, we'll have to see. Obviously, that is extremely eye-catching. Maybe this occurs, maybe it doesn't. We'll have to wait and see, guys, right? If this were to occur, obviously this would be historic, a once-in-a-generation snowstorm potentially right there. But again, that seems not supported by the European. And I'll show you what the Canadian thinks of it. But look, there's that Pacific moisture. Again, we see warmer temperatures, but that means snow for the areas that have been just under bitter cold, a bit more of rain, potentially across more northern locations than what we've been where the rain has been falling, which is really just the coastal areas, as even much of the south has been seeing some decent snow. North Carolina, the Outer Banks with yesterday's system. Notice more moisture, more snow, ice. I mean, right, it's an active pattern. Again, will the storm occur exactly like that model just showed us? Probably not. Will that storm even occur? Possibly. But I do think that flow will definitely be kind of, I guess, will continue to be shown in the models in the weeks to come. I have pretty high confidence in that because I started seeing that flow at the edge of the long range a few days ago, and now it has creeped its way up because as time passed, it has become more confident in it, the models. But sorry, I didn't mean to go that jump that far ahead. But look, this is what the GFS showed with that nor'easter with the model run that came out today at noon. What I just showed you was one that came out an hour ago, the most recent data. But look, the one at noon today did show a snowstorm, but it just kind of took off the coast. It wasn't as significant. So it's interesting. The GFS actually trended towards more of a significant event, while the European still doesn't show anything. Again, if you recall, the European did show a nor'easter, right? It showed a nor'easter across portions of the Northeast at the hour 2:40. And look, the GFS also shows that, so that's interesting. Again, several chances for storms, and there's that Pacific moisture. Again, we're gonna cause some warming temperatures, but look, snow for many locations, rain, bigger systems, right? Not just these little clippers or coastal systems. I mean, coastal systems will probably still be there, but yes, and that does mean that some of these temperatures will be moderating, as again, we've been having a very, very cold weather pattern, extremes, some warm air, but it's been rather limited. And notice in the long range, these Arctic outbreaks become a bit less, and we start seeing these incursions of very warm air out ahead of any system. Look at that, boom, as it takes off. Obviously, the cold air will still be present enough, I think, for it not to be producing snow across southern Canada and, thunderstorms in northern Minnesota. I don't think it'll be that big of a pattern flip, but I think it's just going to be one that's favorable for a lot of snow, in my opinion. Now, let's take a look at the Canadian. Let's take a look at what it shows. Again, this one only goes out to 240 hours, so just at the end of the medium range. I don't like to call that 240 the long range yet. It's a bit not too far out enough to be called a long range. But notice, again, supportive of active, a kind of active pattern in terms of clippers. But really, other than that, pretty calm. Let's see if it shows that nor'easter threat. It does show a storm. It doesn't really develop anything out of it. So in line with more of the European, I would say, than the GFS. Again, it does, by hour 240, if you recall, the Canadian and sorry, the European and GFS show a nor'easter. This one doesn't at all. So they're all on different kind of parts. But look, it shows specific moisture. Cold air, there's still plenty of it. So I would say that the pattern is looking very active. Now, those are just a few models. I want to show you the GEFS, and this won't show us precip, but it will show us temperatures. Now, what you can assume is that if you see more of a west to east pattern, right, so a zonal flow, that means that there's going to be more activity. And let's see in which way do these models trend. So again, right now we're clearly seeing a jet stream that runs like this, brings that cold air, and these clippers just kind of come across these that baroclinic zone, and they just ride that until the pattern changes. Now, as I push this forward, do note that what we see is a pattern that starts moderating. Now, it's not warm. I don't think it's going to be turned into a warm pattern, but I wouldn't call it the same pattern that we've been having, or a cold pattern really. And notice that a lot of this cold air gets centered back towards the north and west, where it was earlier, if you recall, in December. And what this means is these storms, instead of riding way over here, they start coming in through the west. They start sneaking in through here, and the positioning of these makes them really, really appetizing for any Gulf of Mexico moisture to join them. That was a horrible arrow. And they become very large systems, and they could become nor'easters. They could become a snowstorm for the Midwest, upper Midwest, just vertical kind of shooting systems we've seen already at the beginning of this year with that active pattern. So I do think that there's a lot of I guess, excitement in a long range for those winter snow lovers. And again, if you don't want the snow and cold, I guess it's February already in this 384-hour timeline. So probably 2 more months, and it would be relatively close to spring. And I don't know if I've said this, but I do think this year's winter is gonna drag out quite a bit than most people would like. So let's take a look at the European ensembles. So notice this is the 5-day timeline between the 27th and the 1st of February. So notice during that time frame, if anything were to occur, it would be a starting pattern across the west of activity and a little bit of a chance for a nor'easter. Again, you can see some ensembles show it right there, a little bit of a chance. Some don't really. Some bring it more further towards the north. You can see a lot actually showing that similar scenario, but a scenario like that would just clobber Boston. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But this is still remarkably inactive compared to what I'll show you the last 5 days of this long range look. Again, we're starting to see an active pattern compared to the next 5 days. There's gonna be nothing across the west. Really, the next 5 days are going to be the calmest. You can see just those clippers, but that starts getting acted up, the nor'easter threat, and of course that western threat. And then look, the last 5 days, we start seeing a full-on pattern of potentially large systems, snow that covers from coast to coast. Those classic storms, nor'easters abound, Midwest systems, mountain snow, getting into those higher elevations. Really, again, good indicators of a pattern change that could be very active. GFS ensembles. I can't show you the whole map all at once. I could only zoom in regionally, but let's just take a look at the west coast, since that's where the pattern will be starting. And let me show you again. This is very zoomed out. I don't know if you see it, but we've been having a very dry pattern here, almost nothing. And notice this will continue for the next week. But as I kind of propel this forward, you see the map filling in with purples, blues, and this isn't supposed to show you, oh look, your city is going to get snow or not. I'm just trying to show you that the overall region is starting to get colorful, which means snowfall in this case, because this is a snowfall map. But of course, for lower elevations, this would mean rain. And notice that up until the 240 hour, it's really just across the northwest. Some precip chances across further towards the south, but in the last time frame right here, it just blows up. We see many instances of snow potential. You can see further towards the south. Obviously, some models still not as supportive, right? Still some of the ensembles. Look at this one, completely keeping it mostly dry. But there's an overwhelming amount that are keeping it active, which is why I'm leaning towards this scenario. Again, and just because we don't see a ton of snow across the west doesn't mean that these systems could come in pretty weak, right? Dropping a little bit of moisture and then exploding into systems using the Gulf of Mexico moisture and any remaining moisture that's kind of floating around, I guess, if you will. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that I'm relatively confident in this. I do think that the pattern will be getting more active. This is a model I look at that goes out a month out, so yes, it's pretty inaccurate. If you think the GFS is inaccurate, this one is, or I guess, inaccuracy in a single model, right? It doesn't show us exactly which storm, or you can't tell, like, oh, see this system, that's what will happen. It's just meant to show us what the pattern may trend towards. Notice again, it keeps a relatively inactive pattern. It does show a few of those nor'easter threats that some of the models haven't supportive of. You're right there, boom. That is definitely not out of the question. But after this, you could see the this model, I should say, starts showing systems. And again, that same pattern, more off the ocean. Again, I don't think there will be a lack of cold air. As you can see, some of that snow and ice making all the way into the south. But I do think it will be a lot more, I guess, a lot more snowy. And you can see, I mean, these systems just come in one after the other. And if you recall, every La Nina pattern, I've said this, has a certain kind of pattern where there's a few weeks of just extreme weather, just weeks of very heavy snow. Last year, it occurred across my location between late January and mid-February, so it was a bit earlier than this one, I think, will be. And it dropped, I mean, it dropped well over 30, I think, almost 40 inches here in just 3 weeks. That was a record. It was insane, the snow and the banks that were laying around. But after that, it was done, and winter was kind of faded away. And if you look back at historical years, 2017, 2018, that year was also a La Nina. And if you recall, that year had a attack of snow in the February of 2018, very similar of what I think will be happening this year, of also just legendary proportions. I mean, there was storm after storm after storm across the Midwest, the Northeast. It was a very active pattern. And otherwise, the winter, besides that, was kind of lackluster. There was a lot of cold air in December, and then it just kind of faded away once that February snowstorm, the onslaught came. Another winter that comes in mind is 2016, 2017. That one had an onslaught, but in December. There was a lot of snow in December. And then it kind of subsided. February, March, nothing. There was a lot of nor'easters, but then it came back in March, and it kind of, with the flurry of snowstorms. And then that was it. So they kind of come in these waves, and I do think that once this wave begins, there could be a lot of snow for some locations, more than they can handle in some of these locations. And notice that the snow depth anomaly right now currently is way below average for a lot of these locations. It hasn't been snowing really at all, but as you get towards the long range, that gets eroded, and it actually becomes positive across a lot of these locations. So again, we'll have to wait and see whether or not this occurs, but it's looking definitely promising. And this is for many regions: the West, the Central United States, the Northeast, even the South. So stay tuned. That's basically all I wanted to show you guys today. Again, nothing too concrete, but I do think there's some interesting insights here, especially about the La Nina winters being, filled of these events that are just an onslaught of several weeks of extreme snow, and then that's kind of it. And I was wondering last year if that was going to happen, and it did. We saw, at least in my area, just that attack of winter for a little bit of time. During that time frame, also the Texas freeze kind of happened, and that's what it did support that La Nina pattern. And in this year, we'll have to wait and see. I do think that we will uphold. Another year, by the way, 2012, 2013. Was when it was super. I mean, I think Chicago, my city, had just a few inches up until late February, and then late February, early March, we just got blasted with snow. It still was a below average winter, but we went from having 5 inches to 30 in a matter of 2 weeks for our snowfall amount. So we'll have to wait and see. I know I keep saying that, but yeah, and just because it's an inactive pattern now, or relatively, doesn't mean that we can't see a few little storms like this little clipper that might drop up to 6 inches in some locations. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next episode. See ya.